I'm here with my friend Andrés Duany, and we had a lovely conversation last night. You talked to me about what you're excited about, and I'm just excited to meet you. Let me tell you why. You've been doing things that make a difference for decades. I've watched your work for as long as I've been in architecture.
So nice of you.
I think that you're an inspiration.
Most architects don't say such nice things to each other.
You're an inspiration to an industry and to a profession. And the way that you do things is very kind of commonsensical, and I was really taken by that. And there's so many things that we can talk about that we touched on last night.
Right.
What would you like to talk about that you're excited about? We're sitting right now, I should say, in this amazing, I don't want to pretty it up as you said, so this is a mobile home that we're sitting in, right?
This is a tiny house, which is the smallest of our models. It's only 200 square feet.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like
And this is supposed to go in parking lots, and it's for millennials to live close to their jobs, so they don't have to commute. Like, imagine Silicon Valley, and all the kids are commuting an hour and paying $3,000 to live in a ranch house somewhere. Instead of their parking lot being used by a car, it's used by this.
Terrific.
And it's permitted by the Department of Motor Vehicles, so it's actually legal to do that.
And you got that permitted in California too, right?
No, that's in California, next door.
Okay.
This is permitted in Alabama.
Okay.
I could get it permitted in California, it's just it was built in Alabama.
Right.
But this thing has crossed 1,900 miles already, this little thing, and perfect condition. Because plywood is incredibly durable.
Right.
You know, sheetrock isn't. It falls apart, but this is like a yacht.
So, and this is factory built.
This is factory built, but with very low tech. You know, skill saws, a couple of rulers.
Right.
So it's what I call middle tech.
Yes.
You know, it's not Adobe and, you know, rammed earth, but it's also not, you know, 3D printers. There's something in the middle that is a middle, you know, medium tech that I think anybody can do.
That's remarkable.
And the more you go high tech, the startup costs are just too high.
You had to look at a few building codes in order to get this done, right?
I think there's a lot to be done with the with finding the loopholes in the codes.
Yes.
You know, and I very much enjoy finding loopholes and just bypassing the bastards, you know, that are preventing things from happening. You know.
And you were able to do that, right?
I did actually. The very first project I did, I wanted to have a smaller setbacks at the front, and it says, no, you can't have smaller setbacks. You got to have, you know, 25 foot. And then I said, what's your setback if this were a parking lot? And they said 0. So I said, well, I just relabeled it. This is a parking lot. And I labeled all the streets parking lots. And they couldn't, they said, okay, I guess it is a parking lot. And so, and that kind of said, wow, that's the way to do things, is to actually read the code to find what the loopholes are.
Right.
And this is, these two buildings are just huge numbers of what you would call hacks, you know, to the system. And the system ain't that smart. It doesn't fight back. It just goes, okay, if it says that, we can do it. So that's what this represents. In a large sense, this represents. Now, you asked me what I was interested in. You know, we're in the second decade of the 20th century, and the 21st. If this were the 20th, it would be after the First World War. You know, where everything had fallen apart, and then we can get a clear vision of that it's going to be a tough century. You know, the Depression, Second World War, Cold War. You know, you could see that things were not. And I think that actually we're pretty close to a condition in which we're going to see with climate change and with a lot of the financial problems, we can see that it's going to be a tough century. And buildings like these that actually move away from trouble and towards opportunity. Okay, I'm saying that very literally. There's trouble there. There's flooding. There's fire. There are no jobs, you know, but somewhere else in America, it's okay that you don't have to abandon your real estate. You can take it with you.
That's beautiful.
And there's a lot to be said for actually a movable urbanism. It's also easier to invest in a place that you can move away if there's a failure. Like, oh, it collapsed. Okay. There's never a place in a time in this country when the entire nation has collapsed. You could always go somewhere to find a job, and this is part of this.
And we're a mobile culture, right? I mean,
we love it.
We're used to that, so that fits in really well.
Yeah.
Before you move on too quickly, I just have to say that your ability to be a highly skilled planner, as well as an amazing designer, has allowed you to kind of bring those two things together.
Yeah,
right?
they inform each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm not the highest skill. in both. There's really brilliant people in both. But the combination is so rare. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
And also
profound.
there's a third leg, which is I actually understand developers in the market. And developers in the market often don't understand design, and nobody understands planning. And so it's just it's actually a combination of all three. And when you have all three, you don't have to be brilliant at any of them, but it's a rare combination
To be able to bring those together.
Yeah.
Well, you have a sensitivity to developers, right? You understand their challenges, and you don't complain about it, and that's what I love about you know, kind of talking.
Well, I have
to
to
you about
disclose,
this.
my father and grandfather were developers.
Really?
Yeah. Now, normally I would say, therefore I am not a developer and I hate them, right? Because that's what kids are supposed to do. But actually, I just ignored them. And then when they passed away, I realized I'm remembering my father all the time and things he would tell me.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, so one of the things he said is, actually, you'll never sell anything. You sell two kinds of things only. They either have to be the cheapest in the market or they have to be sexy. Don't try both. I mean, don't try not. You know, do one or the other. And so when I designed these things, what he meant was sensual.
Yes.
You know, so yes, this is not the cheapest in the market, but it is just feels good to be in it.
Yeah.
So you got to do one or the other.
This is a terrific space. I think that what this space does, it gets back to the essence of what architecture is. Christian Norberg Scholl says it's the concretization of existential space, right? And when you get that part of it right, then the finishes just enhance what's already there.
Do you know what is interesting about this thing? This thing is designed to be in public, in a lot of public and a relatively hostile public. If you think about where we are now, with thousands of people outside, and God knows that drum beat, and you know, at night there's this terrible light from the, you know, the cobra heads and so forth, and you're constantly comfortable. You see what I'm saying?
Sure,
That's really the space.
Yeah, right.
This is supposed to survive tough areas in cities,
Right.
and it does it really well.
It's a sanctuary.
It's totally sanctuary. Yeah,
Right.
you feel extremely safe.
Which is a huge part of your planning work, right? It's something that you know, I kind of marvel at. I mean, you take that idea, we talked about it last night quite a bit, you take that idea of privacy and you've elevated it to an art and a science.
Well, you know, the thing about privacy, actually what we were talking about is that people don't want more yards, they want more private yards. We discovered that absolutely demonstrably. You know, it doesn't matter to have a bigger lot if everybody's looking at you anyway. So it has to be a very big lot to be great.
Yeah.
But the medium lots we make in America are not private. So we discovered over time that if you made a courtyard house that was actually quite tiny, but was private, people actually paid more for less land. So people walk into our projects and they say, how dare you charge more for less? So we'll just sit out there and say, sit here and look around. Okay, so they sit, they say, calm down, look around. Is anybody looking at you? No, it's true. No. Now go to the big site down the street. Sit in the backyard and tell me how many people are looking at you. And it just makes the sale, because it's not quantity, you see? But when you're looking at statistics, like, oh, this is less per square foot, like I'm getting a bigger lot, you have to calm people down. Just sit down, have an orange juice. You know?
On the quantitative side of it, right?
They think the quantity is better,
Yeah.
but it's no, it's actually privacy that you're after, isn't it? You know?
And what you do with your work and how you present it is that you get people to actually experience what it is that you're talking about.
Yes, actually, that's true. I didn't think of that. Yeah.
Yeah. This is an example of that, right?
Yeah, I just like to think that I make them less stupid, but yeah, experience this. Not less programmed, less programmed. Because you see, when they come see our projects, they have been programmed by the competitive developments to look for, oh, it's quantity and this and where's the, you know, all this.
And I'm seeing some of your father's influence on that, because when you can tap into that sensual quality that people experience, that people have, nobody can compete with that, right?
Well, I will make a thing. I feel designs very sensually if they're in the warm climate. And whenever I design anything up north, it's horrible. And
I don't believe that.
It's true. I don't do snow well. And so most of the things that actually feel good are actually in warm weather. And I think that's okay to say that.
Yeah.
You know, there are warm weather architects and cold weather architects. And they're really great places up north, you know, that you just want to be there in winter. I just don't know how to do them. But you can see them in books, you know, you can see, oh, I want to be there. Like all these people that actually design houses on the coast of Oregon, you know, these fantastic, I don't know how to do that. You know, it just looks wet and dingy to me.
It doesn't inspire you.
It doesn't inspire me, but there are people that are fantastic at it.
Right.
You know.
But you know what you love.
And
you
I know what I
invest in
can't
that.
do too. That's huge.
Yeah.
I know what I'm not good at.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that a huge part of success, wouldn't you say, is knowing what you shouldn't be doing.
That's really true. And I think the clients trust me more when I say, I'll tell you right now, I'm the best at this. Okay, just flat out. And I'll tell you when I'm not, and then I'll recommend somebody who is. You know, and so they really trust me that way. And I think you know that most of our communities have hundreds of other designers that are doing things that I don't do as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, really skillful house designers like you guys, incredibly skillful landscape architects. I'm just not best at that.
Yeah.
And so I'm quite good at little things.
Uh-huh.
But as soon as you say, make it bigger, I start losing. I said, why would you want it bigger? You know, I don't get into that.
Right.
But there are many people that do big very well.
Yes.
And I don't. So.
Well,
you know.
one of the things that I think you do remarkably well, we touched on it a little bit last night, is these interstitial spaces. Your solutions don't stop at the edges of a property, but they really, you know, seaside.
Totally.
Great first start, and I know you've evolved from then, and you're excited about your new communities.
Yeah.
But just as a first step, those interstitial.
Well, you know what happened
spaces,
in interstitial spaces is that they're actually free, right? Because you're paying for the buildings, you're paying for this, you're paying for this. So if you care about this, which is actually free, it's an incredible value added and no cost. Just be careful, for example, the space in between, sure, it's easy to make it, but if you make a deflection that catches the sunlight at the end of the street, you know, look at like what's happening with my hand now.
Yeah.
You do like that, and you don't deflect it here, you deflect it exactly the distance where it catches the sunlight, you know, when people are coming home. They never stop photographing it. Now, what did that cost? Zero.
just a good.
That's what I
design
mean.
element, right?
Yeah, it's just the interstitial spaces are free. It's an incredible value added.
Yeah. So I met Joseph last night from your office, and you have young people that work for you.
Yeah.
What would you say to young professionals, both in the building industry and in the design professions, of a point of departure, you know, someone that's been in the industry for a few years, and what advice, insight would you say to them?
Interesting question. In some ways, I think that it's tougher than ever because the developers are very much spreadsheet oriented now. My generation, because of LSD and God knows what, was actually idealistic. You know, you can tap on something. Do you remember when you were a hippie and idealistic, right? And they say, yeah. Now, that's not, you're sort of living well and enjoying life and enjoying the day is not the way the current people keep score. They keep score by getting richer, okay? And so what happens is that I meet the younger developers, all my clients are younger than I am, and I try to tap into the old idealism.
Yes.
And it's pretty suspect. They say, oh, really? You want me to, well, does that make me more money? And I said, no, actually, but it probably will in the long run. Well, my spreadsheet says no. So one of the things that I find is unfortunate is that, by the way, they're probably nicer people, the younger people, but they're not. They're it's spreadsheet oriented.
Yes.
I'm not saying they're less idealistic. It's just because they understand doing things well, but the spreadsheet dominates, and that's new. And so I haven't figured out how to overcome that yet.
Yes.
Like, for example, appreciation. Like if you do well, the price is going to go much higher, the value, than the spreadsheet says. Well, prove it to me. Well, actually I can't, except I've done it before. The other thing that I think is really important, their mission is much more important than ours, which is to save the world. So they have an extraordinary mission, right? I mean, really, save the world. Not just win World War II,
Right.
that's little, but save the world. So if they can actually figure out how to save the world, it's a fantastic mission that generation has, and at the moment, they're actually, the most that they're doing is their personal behavior is more ethical. I just had, by the way, my first artificial meat hamburger.
Oh, what'd you
just
think?
now. It was fantastic.
Nice. So
It was absolutely fantastic.
So you're making a big contribution just by
Well, I had a hamburger. So what I mean is they're always doing the right thing. Okay, so they do two things. At the small scale, they eat the whatever genetically modified hamburger, whatever it's called. And it's called Beyond Meat, okay? So at the small scale, they do the Beyond Meat. And then at the larger scale, they go to Washington to protest because the policymakers have to do a carbon tax. At the middle, we have to figure out how to help them work at the scale at which they can really be effective, like at the community level.
Right.
The community level is not really in the mix now.
Yes.
I mean, you can talk, whenever I say community, you say, oh, surely it is. No, but it isn't, because actually they bicycle and they eat, artificial hamburgers, and they wear old clothes that are made out of cotton, all that. And then they go to Washington to protest. I think our last act is to say, actually, guys, focus on that scale of the community, because you can really be effective. You don't have to talk to the Washington guys. You don't have to worry about what the Chinese are doing. Just get your community adapted so you have a better time of it. A better time during tough times.
Yes.
Because the tough times are coming. Am I going to enjoy them a little more?
Right.
That's the key. And right now, they don't like to hear the bad news. I don't like to hear anything anyway that I have to say. But
I don't believe it.
yeah, it's true. But they certainly. I just have to figure out how to not sound like a grumpy old man. You know what I mean? Like, how do you say, well, I don't want to hear the world screwed. I said, well, you must assume that it will be so you can act
accordingly.
Yes. And I haven't figured out how to position that yet. Not at all.
For being a person that's as accomplished as you are, I'm really taken by your humility in understanding what you're good at and what you still aspire to. So, for you, we talked a little bit about it last night. Retire means to be taken out of service. It's not something I'm very interested in. I don't think it's something you're interested in, right? To be taken out of service, right? What I tell people is I've retired from all the things I don't like.
Yeah.
And that frees me up to do the things that I love, like this.
Yeah.
What would that be for you?
First of all, I did that a long time ago. That's why I built up an office, so everybody else does the stuff I don't like to do. Okay, so I figured that out really early. You make less money because you're overstaffed, but I never do anything I don't like to do. So that was really, what I don't want to be is in their way. The next generation. So what Liz and I did is we actually built, our office is a kind of nave, it's a warehouse. And then we built another one next door. And we moved over. So we're still working, but out of their way. You see?
Smart, yeah.
Yeah, out of their way. And, whoever I'm working with that day, we go over and do a lot of super exciting things that are not actually making money, which would be very disturbing to the other office. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And so what we've done is get out of the way from it's not retirement, it's sort of moving aside.
Sure.
Still working, but moving aside to clearing it. To clear it for them.
Yeah. So have you found that I have an attitude about mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Because the team and people have to make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
What's your attitude about mistakes?
Oh, that's very clear. As long as when somebody blows it and they do it and they've blown it because they've been lazy, I never forgive them. But if they've actually done their best and blown it, I don't care.
Yeah.
I just want the best, because I actually blow it all the time, but I'm always doing my best.
But you're creative. You don't make the same mistake twice, I bet, right?
Let me think. No, I make new mistakes every time.
There you go.
How's that?
That's a creative person.
Yeah,
and that's
a creative person.
That's what I
get bored
people.
with the same old mistakes.
Right? That's what I would tell the young people. It's okay to make mistakes, but be creative enough to make new ones, right?
I make new ones, and actually, here's another thing I learned. If you're actually making mistakes that harm you, when you harm other people's projects, and so on, I'm actually quite conservative with our clients. But when we're doing our own work like this or committing, I actually think I'm very aware that I'm making a mistake, but I'm not really getting in trouble. Okay, getting in trouble is getting bankrupt and ending up in jail. Okay, that's trouble. But getting a couple of people not liking you, that not like you, like half the people out there don't like you, that's like, so what? I'm not kidding.
That's okay. That's okay,
yeah,
right?
I don't even know they don't like me.
You know what Churchill said?
I just know.
Churchill said, "You have enemies. Good for you." That means at some point, at some time, you stood up for something.
I love that. Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So I stand up for things that upsets them because they're certain, and they hear my name and they have
get apoplectic.
They apoplectic.
Sure.
And it doesn't harm me at all.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, you have to look at it.
Right.
Because getting into trouble is really not being, I think one of the problems now is that people think that they're in trouble because they have been disliked.
That's a good point, right?
That's not trouble.
So social media, right, and news to a large extent,
Yeah.
the saying relative to that, the road to unhappiness is paved with comparisons.
Right.
If you want to get really unhappy, then
Yeah.
start to compare. And that's the advice that I would give, like my kids, young
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
is don't worry so much about what
Look,
that...
I know people that are doing so well in Silicon Valley, financially, for example, 30, 35 years old. I know a couple in particular, and they're profoundly unhappy because they're already millionaires, but they're not billionaires. So, they're going, are you kidding? You don't have to work a day again in your life, and you're upset.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that's deadly. You know, they don't know. The people I admire, there's a couple of people in my generation that as soon as the way they put it is, when I got far enough ahead, not when, you know, that's their term. When I got far enough ahead, I quit and moved to X.
Yes.
You know,
Or moved on to X.
you moved on to X, and X might have been a different city or a different life. And that's so admirable. Like instead of just accumulating, keeping score that way, they said, this is actually more than enough to do what I want to do, which is, in the case I'm thinking of, live in Paris in a wonderful private house, okay? And that's enough forever. And the guy he's one of my first client ever. I never thought of it. I never thought he would, because he was so anxious to make money. And then suddenly he quit, and not because he was unsuccessful. He just found he had enough and moved to Paris.
Well, he had a goal, right?
Yes. And he was I really admire the guy. Because
Yeah.
everybody I know is killing themselves, accumulating.
Yeah.
For what, you know?
Sure.
You know, in their yachts, like with phones on 2 ears and flying around crazy, you know.
You have done a marvelous job of defining happiness for yourself, haven't you?
Oh, yes.
With a certain quiet discontentment, because that's what every creative person has.
No.
Right?
I think, let me think about it. The thing about happiness that is so great about the American promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which, by the way, is the best marketing slogan of all time. Think of a better one. Like, that's why no one goes to Canada.
They need a new slogan.
We have a better slogan.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you get these people, and that's the promise. They really think they're going to get it. But the pursuit of happiness is self-defined. So there are people who really want to live in the little house in the woods, and people who really want to live the urban life, you know, like that. And I get all these sort of moralistic people that say, no, everybody has to live in urbanity.
Right.
And then other people say, well, all these urban guys are degenerate and they live terribly. No, like, you know, please, like, people prefer this and they prefer that.
There's no morality in design.
Well, I think what you should do, in design, what you should do, yes, exactly, okay, but exactly. But the way it manifests is if there are three kinds of market segments, you want urban, you want rural, and you want suburban, with 3 cars in front. Okay, if that's your trip, in my site, I'll find room for you. So what I do, and this is an important distinction, as a planner, I don't, and I'm very different from other new urbanists. Other new urbanists are always trying to banish things. Banish this, banish that. I try to allocate them. You know, so yes, you want a 3-car garage? I know exactly where you go, but I'm not going to have you mess up the urban street.
Right.
Okay? And you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And you're going to do that, and we're going to do that as well as possible, but you can't be anywhere. And you urban guys, you guys who want density, no, you can't be out there for people who want to live in country living.
Right.
So I find myself that it's very easy in large projects. Small projects you have to decide, but in a large project, there's usually enough land to allocate to every market segment. And the skill is actually not saying, I did what all of you wanted, but actually making it cohere.
Yes.
You know, because, see, what happens with pods, with pod design, is you say, well, this is this market segment, this is the entrance, this is this market segment, that's the entrance, that's this market segment, that's the entrance.
It polarizes.
It polarizes. What we do is we do all 3 market segments absolutely seamlessly. That's actually the special skill set.
Yeah.
It's actually that looks in the end. We meet all the market segments everybody does, but they look completely coherent.
Right.
If you look at all of our plans, they're not a collector with a bunch of pods.
Right.
Although if you study the program, it's absolutely identical.
Right. your ability to write a program, right, to do the pattern book for the neighborhood, right, the design guidelines,
right,
and
right.
set the parameters for how you want things to be,
yeah.
allows it. And that's I mean that to be encouraging, because I think it's a wonderful integration that gets lost when you have one person, an engineer a lot of times, that designs these lots.
Everything.
Right? And then you have an architect that's trying to place something on
Right.
it. And the McMansions of the last decade were a result of the house needing to scream, look at me, because there was nothing else there in terms of the community.
Well, there was something else, but you're not supposed to look at it.
Right. Yeah. But when you integrate all these things, and I think that going back to the pattern that you establish, it allows these things to happen. But you understand that.
Okay, but here's one of the reasons we use several architects. People say, why do you hand over to dozens of architects? It's possible for us to design everything at the beginning.
Yeah, right.
Even though it's built over 10 years. Once you design at the beginning, it's actually essentially been designed in one design campaign.
Guidelines, right?
But it's designed in one design campaign.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so what we do, that's without guidelines. We just simply draw it, you build it. Take 10 years to build it. What happens when you hand over to others with design guidelines is that they each respond to developing circumstances. Things change, styles change, et cetera, and then finally they also learn from each other. So the first instance of something is actually not that good. You know, the first courtyard house isn't that good, but the ethos that we create is that instead of avoiding, the architects say, oh, you did it, therefore I can't do it. We say, no, in ours, you learn from each other.
That's good.
Okay?
And you live that too, in the communities you develop. Seaside is the first one, Alice is the last one.
We do. But here's a really interesting. We did Playa Vista.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Playa Vista, the huge project north of the airport.
LAX, yeah.
Okay, if you walk from the west of Playa Vista, it's like 1.5 miles long. If you walk from the left of Playa Vista to the east, from earlier to later, you will see the history of architecture precisely in the last 3 decades. Just look at it, do it sequentially. And by the way, it's not only the style, but the landscape design. And so you have this thing, I just did this recently and I got really excited about it. I said, oh my God, this is the last 3 decades of architecture. First it was postmodernist, okay? Then it was straight traditionalist, which is not postmodernist, really good Mediterranean. And then it was Playa Vista. Playa Vista started postmodernist, with all that implies. So cool then, so not cool now, right? And then straight traditionalist, straight Mediterranean, which came later, and actually still holds up, obviously.
I think so too.
Yeah. And then what happened was you see the first moves of modernism, which was stripping down the Mediterranean, but still pretty heavy, heavy pieces, but no ornament. And then you get progressively 2 phases of better and better modernism.
Higher level of
lighter, yeah. And then finally you got decon. All this stuff going like that. And the landscaping is exactly the same way. Postmodernist landscaping, traditional landscaping, modernist landscaping, and finally, absolutely wild-ass landscape urbanism. And it's fantastic. Now, no one could have done that unless we had handed over.
Yes.
Interesting story. So, I didn't supervise the project at all. It was the guidelines that survived because they were embedded in the permitting, okay? So I decided to go congratulate the honcho who built it, the top guy. And I went in and said, I was going to be, how you have to bow to people. Thank you for doing this. You're so great. And so I walked in, and there was this man there. He was 45 or 50. And I walk in, and he says, oh my God, Mr. Duany. Oh. And I said, who are you? And he says, I was that coffee boy at the charrette. I was the gopher.
And he's 45 now.
He's probably 50. He was the gopher. And I actually remember him because he wore a little suit.
Amazing.
And then he stayed in the company. And actually, so you get this guy who actually is now a CEO that actually heard us talk.
That's amazing.
He heard us talk as a young guy. And it was so beautiful because actually, he wasn't just a hired guy.
Right.
He had heard it.
He was part of the heritage.
Totally, he was part of the heritage. All he did, and he called himself, I was the gopher. I brought you coffee. It was just like a stunning experience, actually. So now I actually believe that it's not only important to have guidelines, it's very important to involve humans, young humans, in the charrette. that witness it, so they actually keep the flame going.
That's good, right? And then they can be excited about being the flag bearer for that.
And they understand the interpretation and what was meant. You see?
Yeah, I do.
It's built into them.
We got a whole bunch of people that are going to be upset with us.
Yeah, good. Okay, that's it's a great interview, man. You should do this. This is so good for a living. Interview architects.
Oh yeah, well the fact that you're brilliant at what you do and you're charming. And
So would you tell other guys, hey, you're terrible? Now show me how.
Well,
You're just an asshole. Like, can I interview you? You're not going to tell them that.
oh no, I'm really blunt about stuff.
Well,
if I
you
didn't
should.
like you, I
no,
wouldn't
you're
be
good
here.
at interviewing. You're just good at interviewing.
but-
You should interview architects. This is cool.
Huh? Interview them for what?
Whatever. Find out about them and interview them. Be the Charlie Rose of architecture. No, really, people would learn a lot
From
architects
other
being
architects.
interviewed. Yeah, by architects, not by idiots. We always get interviewed by people who are running a kindergarten. You know what I mean? Like, they don't know how to ask a question.
that was kind of a build your own compliment to me. So all the parts were there. You didn't do a great delivery on it, but I really appreciate it. That's what I call it.
You're good.
A build your
I'm
own
not
compliment.
running a kindergarten. Okay, is that such a high compliment? That's not such a big compliment. Because you know what to ask. And first of all, you know enough about me to know what to ask, and then you know how to ask a question at just the right level. And interviews of architects are not run at the right level. They're always too low.
They get dumbed down.
They're dumbed down.
Yeah, and people don't want to see that.
And then when you try to make them smarter, people get insulted. Why? I don't understand what you're saying. So anyway, no, dude, this is cool.
I'm glad that you let me do it. I appreciate your passion.
Isn't this a great little place to do it?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I hope you come back for drinks after dark.
Seriously?
Oh yeah, we have a Scotch, but we'll break all the rules.
Something I really appreciate about you, and you're still a gentleman.
But you know why? Because actually you don't get, I can't get over how you don't get in trouble. I no longer count on ever getting in trouble.
Why do you
I
think
just
that
do
is?
whatever
Why do you think that is?
I don't, okay, first of all, because this really is a free country, as long as you don't get a bunch of Calvinists chasing you around, okay?
Sure.
But I also know countries where you can actually get in trouble, like Cuba.
Yeah.
And I've worked in places where you can get in trouble. And you don't really get in trouble in this country. You can get people to dislike you, okay?
Which is not trouble in your
That's
mind.
not trouble in my mind.
Which is a really important message, frankly. And I think that that's something that, young people now really need to hear.
Actually,
What you think about me is none of my business.
yeah, no, okay, here's my grandfather, not my father, and he had a statement that was very interesting. He said, the strongest platform is not to be the popular person, not to endeavor to be popular. That's a weak platform. He says the strong platform is to be the indispensable person.
That's good.
And you can't be the popular person and the indispensable person because you have to tell people the truth.
Yeah, that's true.
So I know that even when people don't like me because I'm blunt, and you're blunt too, they still need me.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm just running on nothing but air of popularity, I can become unpopular. They'll just choose the next guy. I think that's the best way to put what I'm saying.
And that's soul sucking, right? When you really think
you lose
about it.
yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're performing for others.
You're doing the intellectual walk of shame, my friend, right? You're leaving a situation and you're not feeling good about yourself.
No, I see people trying to be popular and then they're not popular.
Yeah.
And then I never try to be popular and everybody always wants me. So I know it's true.
You're true to yourself.
Yeah, it's useful. I'm actually useful. I say, the mobile home industry. Okay, last year I gave a talk about what's wrong with the mobile home industry. This year I have 2 models here and they wanted 3. It took 1 year to actually go from, oh my God, we hate this idiot who knows nothing, to Champion Home saying, can you let us build these?
You resonated with them, right?
Yeah.
All progress starts by telling the truth.
But if I had asked them, let me do it your way, they would have eaten me alive.
Sure.
You say so. Anyway, so you just have to tell them.
Principles matter. Thank you so much. I appreciate visiting with you
Sure,
a
great.
lot.